YouTube. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the F and Growth live stream. We're here to talk all about the Webflow limitations, episode number 7. So we've talked about everything from how to hire and plan for growth, how to sell yourself. You know, we've gone in and out in the platform and how to build a business around this platform. Today, we're diving into like the nuances of the platform, what holds us back from growing and things like that. And so we're going to dive deep into all of that. But before we get too started, let's F and grow. Okay. Oof, you got the timing right and everything on that this week. What is up, everybody? Again, my name is Ryan Martirado. This is Joe Krug, and we are the Finsweet team. What is up this week, Joe? Say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody. We're talking limitations, which is such an important topic. No matter what level you're at, limitations is something you have to understand to succeed now and to succeed in the future. So we're going to take something that is seen as a negative, and we're going to show you how to look at it as a positive and how to overcome some of these limitations. This is an exciting one for me.
Yeah, and we're going to dive deep all over the board. We're going to go from low end, like first entry into Webflow, where you kind of start stumbling into or realizing the first limitations, all the way through deep technical limitations that, you know, Joe will dive into some of the nuances and we'll go back and forth on some of that. So welcome, Scott. Welcome, Magdalena, Jay Poucher, Rohan's in the audience. We got a lot of the OGs with us again, but let's start talking about it. Actually, before we get too deep, if you're in the audience today, we'd like to know, what are your frustrations, right? So like, what are things that you run into regularly as limitations inside of Webflow? And this doesn't necessarily need to be technical hurdles. This could be usability stuff. This could be like whatever it is that holds you back from using the tool. We kind of want to know about that. We're going to address that in the Q&A. And so go ahead and leave that stuff through the comments. We're going to be grabbing that throughout the episode and kind of getting, you know, a list of that stuff towards the end. We'll have a bunch of that stuff to talk about. So Pixel Geek in the house, Ariel T, Kyle, everybody. We got a squad today. Okay, nice. Let's go. So what's missing in Webflow, Joe? Let's do it. Where do we even start with this conversation?
What is missing in Webflow is a question and an answer that changes as you progress in Webflow. When you first start in Webflow, you see these limitations of 10,000 items, some display issues with CMS. And these are things that a lot of people know about. They are the core limitations of the platform. As you start getting to the next and next and next level, this understanding of limitation changes. And it becomes, you have a different view of it. And even now, I still see Webflow as a platform with limitations, but now we at Finsweet look at this as an opportunity to fix these limitations, to get around these limitations, or even to let them benefit us. So what's missing in Webflow? There's no official list. It changes as you progress. Really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I just posted in the chat here for anybody that's hanging out with us. We've posted this before. This is a post in the forums with all of the limitations that I forget what the user's name is there, but you can see it in the link. He's just kind of stating and updating every time things get released, like as things get updated. This list is kind of like my go-to whenever anybody asks me, what are the technical limitations? And so we don't necessarily want to like run through all of this at this point, because you can kind of go look at this. What we're going to spend time is kind of going over how we have solved some of these limitations, some of the things that you may need to look through for limitations. But there were a couple things on here that we wanted to kind of point out. And I wanted to start with right from the beginning, a big limitation inside of Webflow is the learning curve, right? Versus some of the more visual drag and drop, manually effective, like again, a Squarespace or a Wix. There's a lower entry point from a technical standpoint, from a knowledge standpoint, from everything standpoint. So right from the bat, like a lot of people are getting excited about Webflow because they see what people can build. And then they go in and they don't understand that you need to know a little bit about CSS positioning, or you have to kind of understand the fundamentals of front end code. And so for me, this becomes like an immediate limitation for people who may not know. And so any thoughts on that, Joe? Like, I know that's not really a limitation for us anymore. We're pro users. We're going to dive deep. Is there anything coming in on that, or thoughts that you have about like those initial just finding Webflow? Obviously, when you're working with Webflow, you got to start understanding technical first. You got to start thinking about how the web works and how to put that into your workflow. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's the way you have to think about it. That as we're talking about, these evolve over time. And yes, I see that as a limitation. Knowing position, that is something that a lot of Wix users or Squarespace users take for granted, that they don't think about this stuff. And when you're selling Webflow, you need to understand these limitations, whether it's your first Webflow site, second Webflow site, or 50th Webflow site. To properly sell Webflow and to make a client happy, you have to understand this before the project, not in the middle of the project.
Yeah, I hear that. And I think that's one of the things where like you really have to start as a Webflow user thinking more like a developer. I know this is the whole no code thing, but this is one of the misnomers of the entire space, is that it's not necessarily about dismissing the code. The more code you understand, and we've talked about this before, the more code you understand, the more technical understanding you have, the lower, the less impact these limitations can have. And so let's look at some of the audience frustrations here. Kyle saying form notifications for clients and reCAPTCHA element sizing. Pixel Geek brings up a good point. 31 people watching. It's actually 44 now and only 9 likes. So come on, y'all, give us some likes. Make sure you subscribe and click those notifications. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Tables in rich text. Scott Humphreys saying tables in rich text, big problem. We don't have any Finsweet hacks for tables yet, do we? That's kind of like just grid
Not
stuff.
for tables.
You gotta just kind of fake it with either.
Yeah, you have to do an embed with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want a proper grid, then it's got to be kind of embedded view or something like that. Rohan saying team account dashboard needs updating. So yeah, as you're working with a team, there's tons of limitations as it comes to like team permissions and different things. And so I don't think we can address any of those right now, but hopefully it's being worked on. So let's see what else our audience, let's see, frustrations. Go ahead, Joe. Were you going to say something there?
Yeah, we created CMS library because of audience frustration. Not you, the audience, but the entire Webflow community. The Webflow community wants a lot of flexibility with CMS. And that's one of the core things that I think is a big limitation with the platform. Display limitations in CMS, whether that's a template page, whether that's a dynamic list. We have very limited and restricted options in showing that information. And if you have a client that wants to do something with CMS, something crazy, something different than just a normal grid, you could be running into problems. And this is not something that you would see on the limitations list. We pass the link to the really nice comprehensive list of limitations. You're not going to find these user flow things in there. You're not going to find that the dynamic slider component doesn't work with CMS. You're not going to find that tabs don't work with CMS. You're not going to find that there is no native filtering. This is why we created CMS library. We created it because there are so many CMS limitations, CMS display limitations. So that's one of the ways that we are approaching Webflow not giving us all the tools we need. We have the JavaScript knowledge, we're providing the library so you can implement it in a more simple way. And that at Finsweet, that's how we look at limitations, opportunities to overcome them.
Yeah. And I think,
and we see a lot of this in the, Yep.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that this is inherent in kind of like all of these new digital platforms. They've all got some limiting factor, something where it's like they're really good at this piece of the pie, right? Think like Glide is great at taking a spreadsheet and turning it into a mobile app. And now they're just now building the ability for you to add your own data inside of Glide. You know, some of these other tools, again, Bubble, great back-end tools, not so easy to build that front end. Webflow's strength is like building this beautiful front end, but you obviously run into limitations when you start to build functionality on top of this. And so I think, again, this is one of those things that becomes incumbent on you as a user of all these platforms, whether you're using WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, whatever it is. When you get into this relationship, tying this back to sales and F and growth, when you get into relationships with clients where you're exchanging money for these services, it's very important for you to understand at least those core limitations, right? One of the first things I did as a user was kind of go and start pushing the limits of what you could build in Webflow and kind of trying to recreate some of the stuff I already knew I could do easily in these other platforms. And that's when I started like running in and testing the things. And so like, I wanted to mention the pro account. If anybody's watching right now, we had a comment on Facebook. Let's see, I'm gonna pull this up real quick. Chad Franklin was asking something on the Facebook group about like, he's building a website and he wants to transfer it off to a client, and he only's got a couple accounts available to like use. And so this is a limitation right here, right? If you're using a free Webflow plan, you're limited to like 2 sites. You have all sorts of other restrictions right off the bat. Listen, if you're going to be a pro in Webflow, if you're thinking you're going to make your business at this, you got to go get that pro account. It gives you unlimited ability to create as many Webflow sites as you want. You can start playing again with cloning sites. You can start grabbing resources, saving things. If you are in the habit of like just creating a project, sending it out and using the free account, and you're trying to build your business, that's going to be a big limitation. So right off the bat, I think one of the core things you need to do is if you're going to commit to making a living at this, or at least making a run at it, you got to go with that pro Webflow account. I'm not trying to just sell Webflow here. There's no affiliate links in any of the effing growth stuff. And so like, I'm not here trying to push Webflow, although we do have affiliate links on some of the Finsweet sites. So let me be clear with disclaimers. But none of this is about selling on Webflow. This is about if you're going to go sell Webflow, you have to have these tools in your arsenal. That's kind of the first limitation you have to eliminate for yourself. From there, you have to start understanding all of these core limitations of the platform. And then you can kind of, like Joe was talking about, start getting into the weeds of like, how do you do X, Y, and Z, which again, is typically where people find Finsweet, Joe. Like this is where people discover us, right? So it's like, Webflow is over here. You can do lots of cool stuff in Webflow. Typically, as you're playing with that, maybe Finsweet's not on the radar. As soon as you start taking that next step, that's really when you start bumping into our content, because we do have so many solutions to all of those limitations. And so that kind of encapsulates the core limitations. Did you have anything specific that you wanted to talk about off that list, or that you wanted to kind of highlight at this point before we go into kind of some of the other deeper stuff?
I do. I see some really good comments in the chat here. We have Austin Kamen. What's missing is the ability to make secure API calls to Webflow CMS. We have Scott Humphrey, 301 redirect import. We have, yeah, those two, fairly technical. I really want everybody to understand that there really are no limitations in Webflow. That's how I like to look at it. That both of what Austin and Scott just said is absolutely possible. You just have to know how to do it. And I love this quote that I just say all the time on sales calls. Anything is possible in Webflow. You just have to know how to do it. There are no limitations. With JavaScript, with the right developer, you can make each of those happen. Secure API calls to Webflow CMS, 301 redirect import. Scott, send us an email after this. We have a solution for it. You can go test it out. Anything is possible. So as you keep going, I want everybody to feel themselves growing in Webflow and getting to the next level, not just in using Webflow, but understanding the limitations and the options for getting around those limitations.
Yeah.
I feel
okay. Go ahead.
No, I'm repeating the same thing over and over because it is just so important for me that I really want everybody to be doing this. Write it down. When you come up with a limitation and you say, hey, I can't do that, write it down. Have your own list. The Webflow limitations list is awesome. I refer to it from time to time. But if you have your own side list and maybe you're researching something that a client's asking you to do, go and look at your list, see what kind of limitations that you may have forgotten about. Understanding them better will get you to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of things around the edges. There's like little cosmetic stuff that I wish we could get. Rohan saying like deleting unused assets, like you know, can clean up interactions. That's obviously little stuff that eventually, hopefully they'll fix. One for me with the CMS that's kind of non-technical is like when you create an element and it's bound to data, like if you've already done the data connections and then you want to copy and paste that somewhere else, it'd be real cool if I could just, with one click, disconnect everything from the CMS. You know, kind of like I can break the connections now inside of the CMS and where you use them on templates, but with individual lists, I can't do that. And we could get into the weeds all over the place with like all of these little things. you know, because we all have like our workflows with Webflow and how we love to use the tool and the things we like to build with it. And so, you know, I think we could probably spend all day. What else is here? Search feature and style manager. I'm not sure what that means, Rohan. Search feature and style manager. Being able to sort e-commerce products by price or name. Yeah, I think filtering is definitely a big space. This is one of our most popular things here at Finsweet. If you look at our YouTube traffic, if you look at what people come to our site a lot for, it's all about complex filtering and solving a lot of those surface level things. Joe, when did you notice that that was like a main thing? What made you decide like, I'm going to go build this, I'm going to go like recreate this? Obviously you needed it for a client project, but like, just let's go back through that, because like obviously you ran into some of these same limitations and you're like, we got to fix this. But then other people have probably fixed this with custom code too, right? I've talked to other agencies and they're like, yeah, we have libraries that do this and do that, but none of them have like a public massive, you know, like CMS library that they support like us. So talk to me about like why you thought it was important to not only just solve these problems, but then to give that back out to the community a little bit.
Sure. The first thing that we released as a company that I was really proud of is Finsweet Hacks. Finsweet Webflow Hacks is the first thing that my first videos out in Finsweet. And I think number 5 has to do with Mix It Up. And it's filtering a CMS collection with Mix It Up and a walkthrough. This was our most viewed video, our most commented video, our most reached out, say thanks Finsweet video. Everyone was loving this. And it was very clearly the leader of every hack that we did. I think the first 20, that one was it. So I said, okay, we need a filtering tool. We need something more formal because Mix It Up is not easy. There are a lot of issues implementing that with Webflow CMS because of the display issues. So we created our own system. That idea led to another idea, and the library continued to grow. So it happened because the community was asking for it. That's what people were asking for. I want to jump into some of these comments I'm seeing. We have some people talking about things that are difficult, or I should say things that take a lot of time in Webflow versus limitations. So we have, let's take the bulk 301 import. I don't really see that as a limitation. That's just a pain in the ass. That's just more manual work than you want, but that's not a limitation. If you were not able to add 301 redirects at all, that's a limitation. Unbinding the CMS data. That's not a limitation. That's just a pain in the ass. And you have to go and unbind each one and put it back. And there's a few of these in here.
Yeah.
Please, when you're thinking of limitations, think of things that Webflow is not allowing you to do. I need either custom JavaScript to make this work, or I need a third-party tool to make this work. That's a limitation. Things that are a pain in the ass and that could be improved workflow, that's not a limitation. That's just better UI, UX.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a good distinction to make, especially as we're still here in this non-technical section, because again, it goes to the usability of the platform, whatever may be individual preferences versus are you actually like hitting a hard wall of a limitation here. The other thing to think about is that even though some of these are non-technical solutions or the CMS library solve some of these problems, it doesn't mean it's easy, right? It doesn't mean that you don't have to learn. And so going back to the initial comments that I made at the beginning of this about part of working with Webflow is becoming a more technical web user and a web, maybe not, again, a developer or I guess you are a visual developer, but like a coder, right? You still have to understand the technical nature of this, and you still have to kind of understand, even when I go through like the Finsweet CMS library or some of those docs to solve some of these problems, you can still run into and kind of beat your head against the wall trying to figure this out, especially the first couple times you've done it. It gets easier, hopefully, and as you start understanding some of that JavaScript and you start understanding how and what it's doing to the page, how it's interacting with the page, etc., hopefully it gets a little easier. But I think that's kind of the core part. And I think what you just said there is important to point out, is that as an early user, you may just see some of these things that you're not comfortable with, or that you're not understanding properly how to do in Webflow, or that may be difficult as limitations. And so that's kind of threshold 1, right? So step 1, get that pro account and start building out and exploring and seeing what those core limitations are. From there, you get into the next step where you start reaching into these some of these non-technical limitations, some of the things that you can solve with tools that are out there, plugins that are starting to be built in the community. And then you get into kind of some of the super technical stuff, which is writing your own code, doing some custom development, etc., which kind of let's make the transition to the super technical stuff here. And this is where I think things get real interesting and where we might be able to add a lot of value to the conversation about how we work to manage some of these. Joe, you were outlining a bunch of stuff in our show notes today that some of the people have brought up, but that I don't really see as limitations because I wasn't ever looking at Webflow to do more than just build a simple website. But as you're working with enterprise level clients or a large agency clients, or you start getting into some more complex use cases, you start running into other things that have to do with, more dealing with APIs, like you were talking about the display properties. Joe, do you want to dive into some of that heavy technical stuff? I'm going to look through the comments here and kind of line up a few things that we can talk about in the audience Q&A next. But I'm going to give you some time to kind of dive into this, and I'll ask questions and go back and forth and kind of play devil's advocate about some of this more heavy technical stuff as we go.
Great. We are becoming more technical as a team at Finsweet. We have more technical clients. We have more enterprise clients. And because of this, we are now starting to learn these new limitations. So last year, these were not limitations in my head. Now they are limitations in my head. I'm getting to that next level. Why? Because people need this stuff and it requires JavaScript. This is a deal breaker for most people. And a lot of companies that want to come to Webflow, they can't do it because of these core platform limitations. First, no ability to run server-side functions. This is a deal breaker for so many companies. We have no control over the back end of the project. You may need some very simple server-side code to do something that makes the whole website work, and you can't do it natively in Webflow. That's really difficult for a lot of companies, especially big companies, to go make that switch.
There's some.
You have no.
There's some issues for that, right? That's has a lot to do with how Webflow's serving out the pages and security issues with letting them do stuff on Webflow servers and whatnot, right? So there are some good reasons for some of this. But
Sure.
It doesn't mean it's not a limitation, right?
Right. And you're right. No control about how the page is served or rendered. That's when you get to more complex things, this is a problem. Authenticating users, rendering data from APIs, safely performing CRUD operations, preserving app states. This would be able to take Webflow from a front-end marketing tool to an application builder. But we cannot do that in an easy way. There are very few teams that are able to do this. We now have full control of this. We feel with all of our devs, all of our learning, all of our training, we can now do everything I just said. But it's a deal breaker for so many people, and it trickles down to all of the issues that we run into in the application.
Yeah.
We have no development workflow between the Webflow platform and external environments. Companies are looking to work in their database to Webflow. Companies are looking to work with their API in Webflow. If you are not a JavaScript developer, if you don't understand this, which you're probably not, that is a problem. I don't understand this. I'm really good at Webflow, but I'm really good at Webflow. I'm not a JavaScript developer. You need somebody to help with this. So these are core issues. And because of this, we're not seeing as many community tools and plugins that we can. Even though Webflow doesn't have a plugin marketplace, there is a lack of tools available. Finsweet is trying to release as many of those as possible. We have companies like JetBoost. They are creating applications for Webflow. And this is a little difficult for us because we don't have the proper documentation. We don't have a designer API. We don't have all the tools that developers want to use to work with the platform. If we did, maybe more of these limitations in the comments here could be solved. Maybe we can work faster to go and solve these limitations. But right now, that's not possible. So these limitations are at the top level, and only a few companies and a few people can go and access those.
Yeah.
So that's where we are now at Finsweet. That's what you should be working to, and that's what the big companies are asking for.
This is one of those points where maybe it's good to just kind of have like some good heavy conversation about like that whole ecosystem, because it seems to me that Webflow as a core function should be interested in figuring out how do they reach out to more developers? How do they make it more developer friendly? Recently in the Webflow Slack and throughout the community, I've seen some questions asking about how do they build some community around developers. And so for sure, this is something they're discussing internally at Webflow. But how do you feel? Because it's kind of a double-edged sword for us. Like, we're one of the few people who are kind of focused on developing and building and committing significant development resources to Webflow right now, which gives us an advantage because there's not a lot of people in the space. And so we're kind of okay to be playing around, and there's only a few people right now who are doing this. And I think we're okay with that because it gives us that advantage. But at some point, you're going to see this big flood of development talent to Webflow. And what does that start to look like? What is going to happen between now and then? Like, what do you think Webflow's going through? And maybe you don't want to speculate, so maybe you talk about what we're going through as Finsweet, but I just kind of want to talk about this evolution of what's going to happen, because these limitations, like right now, we're still in the real early stages of this. And I think over the next couple of years, we will see new limitations as these ones are restricted and people start doing more and more with the platform. But talk to me about what's going through your head as an agency owner, as someone who's preparing to kind of ride this wave. What are we planning on? What are we looking at from a development trajectory? How should businesses be preparing for this? Let's dive into some of that.
One of the reasons why we release so many tools to the community is to learn. Top priority is to get you the tools that you need to use Webflow better. Second reason is to learn. How many questions do we answer in Sweet.js with our CMS library? How many comments do we see in all of our products and tools? All of this is helping us improve our tools, improve what we build for you. And this is getting us to that next level. So I think that we're going to see a lot more clonables. We're going to see a lot more mini tools. We're going to see a lot more companies create entire brands, entire companies around add-ons to Webflow. I know that Webflow has a lot for developers, and they're planning and they're doing all of this to essentially create a plugin marketplace. Until that happens, and even after that happens, we're going to see an entire community specifically around tools and products. So at Finsweet, I think that we are one of the first, or the first, of creating a large array of products, a large array of offerings. And I think we're going to see more people like this very soon, probably within a year.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's really starting to kind of pick up now. And this is where, again, and now, so it's like, this is very interesting too in the model, because like we've kind of built a lot of these tools, and now our focus is shifting to education, because we still understand that, yeah, you can solve them, but you still have to know how to do them, or else there's still a technical limitation. And so since most of us are kind of still in this no code space, we're not, active developers, we're not like coders ourselves, we're still looking for that. And so I think the education space is a big play inside of that next evolution. And I think you're just going to see a plethora. I keep going back to this idea that Webflow right now is iOS before the App Store, right? If you think back to when the iPhone first came out, BlackBerry was a dominant player. So to me, WordPress is BlackBerry, and Webflow is iOS. And iOS was just a toy for a long time. And then the App Store came out, and then it became a whole different ball of wax. And so a lot of you guys watching have heard this analogy before. I think as that opens up, as this developer ecosystem opens up around Webflow, you're going to see a complete game change into what you can do, how people plug in with this stuff, and you'll see some of these limitations disappear quickly. I think from here,
we're training for that.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
We're training,
preparing for that. Yep. So,
and I want to, before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to make a comment to everybody listening, regardless of what level you are at. Start doing clonables and start doing projects from limitations that you've figured out. It could be a little tiny limitation. It could be something massive and awesome. Go put it into a Webflow project, do a quick little write-up about it, and then put that out as a clonable. That's going to help you understand the limitation on a whole other level, and it's going to advertise yourself. People will see that and say, wow, this person just saved my whatever project because of this limitation fix.
Yeah.
And this is what we're doing at Finsweet. Every time we release something, we're learning more about it. Now we have a whole different concept about what filters are and what filters should be. And that has put us into creating another product around filtering, because we learned so much from the clonable CMS library that we put out originally. So keep doing that. No matter how small it is, go put out those clonables. It's going to help you and the whole community.
Yeah. There are, oh, hey, Emma, thank you for that. You guys are great. The talks are great. Really appreciate you guys. We appreciate you too, Emma. We appreciate everyone hanging with us and asking questions, and week after week. This has been one of our more popular shows, so we appreciate everyone for hanging out with us. If you are new to the show, go ahead and subscribe and click that little bell notification so you can know we're here every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern time, kind of talking about Webflow. You can now go vote on the FN Growth webpage. You can suggest topics and vote. And so this topic here was suggested by the audience. I think we had something like 64 votes for the topic. Let's see what it was. 66 is what we ended before the show. And so that's kind of how we're running the show now, is getting you all involved and kind of answering your questions. So I see a lot of people here talking. Let's getting back to limitations now. Dr. Muid, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but I want to launch a property listing website, but it needs more than 10,000 items. Is there a way to achieve this? Not right now natively inside of Webflow. And that's, I've heard two things. I've heard it's a structural thing that's going to take a lot of time in Webflow to fix. And then I've heard other things where maybe it's around the corner and who knows. I know we're working on some solutions about this. Joe, do you want to maybe mention that the CMS, the Noble stuff that we're working on briefly? We did a full press release on this, if you guys would like, in November. We're getting kind of close to some of that. So maybe you want to mention that, Joe, any kind of the item limitations?
Sure. 10,000 item limitation is a deal breaker for a lot of people. We are creating a product around this where you can have a true external CMS on top of Webflow. You have a Webflow hosted site, you can have a CMS living somewhere else, and that can solve your 10,000 item limit. So yeah, like I said before, with every limitation, there is an opportunity to overcome that limitation, so that we're doing that with a product. Absolutely.
Pixel Geek, hi Nelson, was making a follow-on to what you were talking about, making clonables, and saying that you could take it even further by making videos about this. If we look at the success of people like Mackenzie Child and Timothy Ricks, who are doing these beautiful YouTube videos about how to build out inside of these systems, they're creating amazing resources for the community, kind of pushing the limits of, you know, their skill set as a creator. They're doing the same thing here, right? They're trying to establish themselves as a storyteller inside of the space. They're trying to like build cool stuff and create resources and assets back for the community. This is a great pointer from Nelson here. Like, if you can find a way to do this, and his caveat here is if you can do it in a language other than English, you could find a huge audience here. There's so many people looking to figure out how to take advantage of these tools. And even if you think like, oh, these are real basic things, there's somebody that's below you in the hierarchy of learning Webflow. And so you can always kind of pass that down. And so I wouldn't get discouraged because you're like, somebody else is already doing this, or, 10 other people are doing this. Because if you think about the ecosystem of Webflow right now, it's tiny, right? There may be hundreds of thousands of users. Maybe there's 100,000 paid users. Maybe there's a couple million Webflow sites. I don't know what the full stats are, but in the grand scheme of things, fairly insignificant. There's like 65 million WordPress sites plus. So there's so much room to grow here. There's so much opportunity for you to build a small business around picking just one of these things and creating a whole solution around that. And so I would challenge everyone watching this to think about the limitations. And I think I saw somebody say this in the comment too. It's an opportunity for you to set yourself apart, for you to solve a problem in a creative way, which is really what about all of this no-code stuff is, or what this no-code stuff is really all about. So what's up? Abrit Creative in the house. Let's see, who else is here? Zarito, I'm not sure how you say that. Hey, Finsweet, I respect your site. We respect you too. Thanks for saying that. Alan Connor. I hear about Webflow being better over WordPress as more secure given no plugins. However, surely with all these extended tools, JetBoost, MemberStack, Finsweet, library, the exposure and risk increases. Not necessarily, and I'll tell you why. And this has to do with one of the limitations we talked about before. Webflow is kind of just serving up static content, right? You can't access like the server, like you can't do anything through a Webflow site that's going to impact the core, like the back end of the site. You know, it's basically just a flat file that's being delivered. And so you can't, there's not a whole lot, right? So like, sure, I guess if you're doing form submissions, if you're sending this in through other integrations, if you start messing with API stuff, sure, you could open yourself up to some security vulnerabilities. Joe, any thoughts on that? We've probably addressed some of those security concerns as we've done some of the workarounds. So what would you say to Alan, who's worried about some of that?
Yeah, I don't think that there's too many security concerns with opening up a plugin marketplace. When you have something like MemberStack, that's a different platform. That is a complete add-on to Webflow. For something like JetBoost, for something like our library, these are very lightweight tools. This is not a WordPress type environment. However, Webflow should create the plugin marketplace to formalize this creation of tools. So I was talking about that there's no proper documentation for developers. There's no designer API. There's no information about how Webflow works. So we do need to do a little bit of searching and exploration to figure that out. If that information is more available to us, we can make sure that that's definitely not an issue.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to consider with WordPress is that it's more like a Android kind of environment where anyone can create a WordPress plugin. WordPress itself is a GPL. It's a open source platform, which means anyone can kind of write to the core itself. And also same thing in the plugin marketplace. Most of the plugins are all released GPL and they're open source, and there's no real checks and balances on what plugins can do. And so I think what Joe is saying here, that the plugins that you're seeing right now in Webflow are kind of just doing surface things on the page. They're maybe reorganizing content. They're kind of like helping you filter or do some interesting things, but you're not actually interacting with the website's database in most instances. Even like on a MemberStack, it's a separate database. You're really just kind of like hiding and using some JavaScript to figure out how things are displaying on the page. And so as that grows, as people start building more complex plugins, it will become incumbent on Webflow to make sure that those plugins become secure. And I think they'll take, again, a more iOS style approach where they're not going to want a million plugins inside of their store that, you know, introduce random levels of technical complexity. The other thing is some of those plugins go unmaintained in the WordPress side. And again, I think you can expect Webflow to have a little bit more care and oversight, a little stronger hand on what plugins get, you know, officially sanctioned and are available inside of that plugin place as soon as it grows. Obviously, this is an entirely speculative conversation because none of this exists right now. So we can only guess about what they're thinking about at that point. So, Alan, I hope that answers your questions.
We have a nice question from Pablo. Yeah. Pablo Cortez. Do you guys think that the price of Webflow is limiting its growth? In first world countries, the price is not a big problem, but in the rest of the world, using Webflow is a luxury. That's an interesting one. I do think that their pricing can use a refresh. I do think it's fair, but I'm also from the US. I'm dealing with US clients that are very happy paying this. And I hear all the time that people overseas cannot work in their local market, which is very, very sad for me. I would love Webflow to be everywhere. So yes, I do think that there should be other packages, and I do think that the price can limit it in a big way.
Yeah.
But I do think it's fairly priced for what it's doing. I want to make that very clear. Fairly priced for what it is doing.
I agree. I think the basic CMS functionality, especially as a US-based customer, seems reasonable to me. I agree with what you're saying that it could be a limitation for some emerging markets or some underdeveloped areas where maybe the market doesn't, you know, it's the hosting or some of the other services might be a lot more competitive. The other thing I was going to say that I worry about Webflow pricing is like what happens when they introduce user accounts and they introduce all these other things like logic flows and whatever. Are they going to then add on a Zapier style pricing onto their hosting? Do they then charge you based on what kind of membership functionalities? And so what I would really hate for Webflow to start doing is to start nickel and diming everyone for like all of these added functionalities, right? When you go to Webflow or WordPress, you kind of get everything baked out of the cake. Okay, wrong. You get a lot more baked into the cake. You get custom user accounts. You get like the ability to set permissions and do some core things that I would hope that Webflow would adapt to their platform without tacking on a bunch of additional like cost. And so from a pricing standpoint, that would be my biggest objection, is hoping that they don't get too nickel and dimey when they start releasing all these other features, kind of like they did with e-commerce, because e-commerce is pretty expensive, right? For what you're getting with e-commerce, I think it's a pretty high price point. And so this, in that context, I think Webflow could start limiting themselves on some of their pricing, but again, it depends on how they're going to play that out. So again, we're speculating. Let's see. Zach is asking about the. Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to touch on sales a bit. Away from the Q&A, sales limitations. Knowing the limitations is going to help you quote projects. When you are talking to a new lead and they're telling you about their project, figure out their limitations right up front and tell them which things will raise the price of the website. Sometimes clients will come to us and say, I want this, 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 and this, and I want to pay this much. Great. We can do all of that except for this one feature. This one feature is going to make it 5 times because we have to do this. We have to do all these other things. Identify those early so you can scope on the call, you can quote on the call, and you can start doing next steps right after the call. You don't want to check on it and say, I'll get back to you. Let me check this limitation. Let me do some tests. As you become more comfortable with the limitations, you can start being more efficient in sales. It's you can even see it as sales automation, being able to hear what they want, give them a price, tell them what works and what doesn't work, and then start the project right away. A lot of our projects start the day after that, 1 to 3 days after the person contacts us, because we give them all the information they need, tell them exactly what they can't do, and give them the solution right away. So this is a big sales thing. I want to make sure this is not just about using Webflow, it's about selling Webflow too.
I want to follow up on that actually, because I've seen a couple times in personal experiences where people have come to me and said, oh my God, I sold this project and now I don't know how to do X. And as somebody who's starting out, it becomes, again, really incumbent that you understand these limitations, because you could get into a situation where you can do 95% of what a client wants. And if you don't call that 5% out before the project starts and say, this could be a hurdle for us, we'll have to maybe adjust on the fly, or if you don't know how to address that ahead of time, you could blow the entire project up at the finish line just because you can't deliver that little 5%. And so again, understanding some of these limitations, going back to Joe, from a sales standpoint, can create some hurdles inside of your process. So
and we see this all the time in Sweet.js. We are hearing all the time about people saying, hey, I need help with this. And we say, hey, we can't do that. This is free JavaScript support. This is a whole mini app. Why did you say that you could do this? You have no JavaScript knowledge. We see it all the time. And that's, you got to be really careful about this. Yeah. So yeah, that's an important one.
And Kai brings up a good point here. What's up, Kai? He says that some clients are happy to adapt to limitations because they love Webflow. Lots of people are flocking to Webflow because of the functionality and the flexibility it gives them. Don't be scared to talk about these limitations with the client and say, hey, we know you want to use Webflow. Here are some inherent limitations at this moment, or whatever wording you want to use, but have that conversation with them. Lots of people just want to use this powerful tool, and they're okay, right? Maybe they have this crazy wish list and they're like, I want X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 list of 100 things. If you can give them 80% of those things, they're probably going to be happy, right? Because like, people are reasonable. Most people are reasonable. And so again, as long as you have these conversations, as long as you have like, these people just, again, open conversations, flexible, communicate, be transparent with people. Your client is your friend, right? There should be no adversarial relationship between you and your client. There should be no butting of heads in a seamless relationship. And so if you're trying to grow your business around this, that should be something you kind of set up from the beginning, is like, let's have real frank conversations with the client. And that becomes, again, just real helpful in growing the business itself. So let's see what else is going in here. Zach is asking about the Webflow Airtable sync. Joe, we got a little bit of news on that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We heard back from Airtable. We are fixing up some error messages, some nice little user experience things, adding some final touches on it. We've just resubmitted it, hoping to start beta testing this week or next week. Officially, when Airtable checks it off, it's live. We're going to start bringing in beta testers. We'll have more on that. Probably next show we'll come with an official game plan of how to get you beta testing and really using this product.
Yeah, and expect us to do more of that in future shows. We're really kind of on a regular basis doing things to bring people in to the community, and a lot of that has been prep work, right? Like I came in October, early October. My goal was kind of like getting a feel for what's going on in the community and how can we provide more value there. Obviously, there's all these really cool projects that Finsweet's working on and stuff that was already coming down the pike. And so you can expect that we're going to start like really speeding up and accelerating on how we bring people into the fold, the events that we do throughout the community, and opportunities for you all to get engaged, not just with us as content, but to start generating revenue through these relationships, testing these tools that we're building, and really coming inside of that Finsweet inner circle. That's our goal for all of this, is to really to bring you guys in to one more layer of connectivity with all of us.
Yeah, and that's why you're here. That's why Rymar is leading this cause in Finsweet. We are doing so much right now that all of 2021, we're going to have all of these releases, just lots of releases, and a lot of the limitations that we're hearing in this chat, a lot of the limitations we all know about, we are targeting those specifically. And yeah, we want you to be here. We want you to be part of it. We want you to be beta testing. So please reach out to us, interact with us, keep asking questions here. You know, one question could lead to a product idea. So tell us what's on your mind. We're listening.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got a lot of +1s for GDPR compliance, GDPR year. Listen, there's an item on the Effin' Growth podcast. If that item gets to the top of the list, we're going to do a whole dedicated show. Like we're going to do like whatever research we can. Like we want to get that up there. So people keep asking us about it. Pierre, I know we talked about it the other day. I'm seeing Juan, Carlos, a couple other people have said +1 for GDPR compliance. We have started looking into this because people have asked us. We're not real versed in this because we're just not. We're here in the States. I know we probably should be a little more concerned about some of this stuff. We kind of leave that to our clients to worry about the legal ramifications of what they're doing with this web property we give them, what trackers and whatnot they put on top of it. And so, again, if you want us to talk about a specific thing, if you want us to dedicate a whole show, go make your suggestions and make sure you're voting on that Effin' Growth website. That's the best way to kind of get us chatting about some of that. So let's see. Wow, this is the truest thing I've ever heard. The proposal getting out of scope during the sales process can totally skew future development for sure. Rohan celebrating 79 concurrent viewers. We're up to 82 concurrent viewers. Again, thank you, everyone. We have not broken 100 yet on this show. I think actually this is the most that we've had at any given time. So feel free to share. If you think we're getting value, again, like the video, share it with some friends. We love having y'all here. We love doing these discussions. So let's see. Not big difference between WordPress plugins and Webflow, heavily relying on third-party services. Yeah, this is one of those things, and this is, who is saying this? Stan Scrivenkek. I'm sorry, I probably butchered that last name. People talk about Webflow a lot, and they're like, oh, we don't need plugins, and it does everything out of the gate, and you know they criticize WordPress for having to have so many plugins. I don't know that those are fair criticisms because they're coming at two different states in development. Eventually, Webflow will have just as many plugins, and maybe not as many in number, but as in the solutions that they provide, right? So every solution that a plugin provides in WordPress will eventually be mimicked and copied over in Webflow. And I don't think it's fair to say right now that Webflow is better because you don't need plugins, because then you have to go out and add hacky plugins all over the top of it to kind of overcome some of these limitations. So that's a really good point there, Stan, that I think it's not a fair comparison right now. And it actually is one of the things that makes WordPress so extensible, because there are so many plugins that you can just add and add functionality. It's one of the things that makes WordPress dangerous, but it is also one of the things that makes it kind of infinitely scalable as well. So thanks for pointing that out for sure. Let's see, Mark Thurman, standing on the shoulders of giants is great until you fall off. Yeah, I assume you're talking about building a business around a new business or a new technology or something like that. That's always a concern. is that if you're building your entire business on a WordPress or a Squarespace or whatever, a Webflow, and the platform disappears, you could fall down hard. Agreed. I think Webflow's at the point where that's not really a concern anymore. At least not until they get some obnoxious offer and Vlad and the team just decide, well, we could go buy a whole continent with that. So let's go start our own web design continent. So. Abric Creative, where do you see Webflow in 5 years in comparison to other website creators, WordPress, Wix, etc., as far as market share? I've got some thoughts on this, but Joe, do you want to take it?
I see in 5 years, it will be silly to not have your marketing site on Webflow. I think it will be the industry standard. Sometimes we have people coming to us and they're not 100% sold on Webflow, but they're pretty close. I think there will be a shift by 5 years where people are no longer going to WordPress, they are going to Webflow for marketing sites. Speculation on the technical side, on the plugin marketplace, on all of that, I can't make right now. But if Webflow does it right, if they release the right plugin marketplace, they get these developer docs out here, in 5 years, I think you could make almost any application with Webflow, which is really exciting. That's when it gets next level. That's when even applications are being built as a standard on Webflow. Maybe that's 5 years, maybe that's 10 years, but it's coming.
I think in 5 years, we'll see a ton of what we've talked about be evolved here. If Webflow doesn't have the plugin marketplace mastered, they've probably been swallowed by somebody who matched their skill set. So I don't know what crazy world that happens in. But maybe there's somebody coming from the edges that is doing crazy stuff that we don't know about yet. You know, maybe there's a tool that plugs in and you export your Webflow code and you wire that up to some kind of back-end tool, and instantly you've got a tool and now you're pulling in different ways. Who knows how all of this stuff is going to work out. I do believe that as you get more functionality baked into the cake natively inside of these, imagine a clonable template where you could just have your job board. You could just do, you know, whatever functionality. Your membership site just works. It's just there. You don't have to build. You just have to like clone it, turn it on. Now you're there, right? And so like that's where I think in 5 years we could be, where you're just literally cloning software at every level. I could see huge design systems built inside of Webflow. One of the things that like Webflow is limited by right now is that you can't use themes, kind of like a WordPress theme. I think WordPress themes will eventually become obsolete. They're going crazy with like these Gutenberg builders, and like there's so many page builders, and it's so abstract anyway right now how you build in WordPress, that I think that's one thing Webflow has going for it, is that it's kind of consolidated this beautiful building experience. And you'll see the evolution kind of happen in the ecosystem around that. I was headed somewhere with this, and I'm kind of losing the WordPress to Webflow. Yeah, I lost where I was headed on the back of that. Oh, competing as an ecosystem. I think Webflow is going to swallow the internet, right? I think WordPress is already obsolete. They just don't know it yet. I think Squarespace and Wix are going to have a really hard time keeping up unless they do something tremendous. I think what you'll see is like a lot of, basically there's going to be two delineations. You need a static site over here, you need a real basic site, you're going to Squarespace, Wix, non-technical. If you're doing anything custom, if you're doing anything cool, if you're doing anything fun, it's going to be happening in Webflow, in my mind, over the next few years. I wouldn't count WordPress out. It's been around forever. There's lots of money in that ecosystem. There's lots of people playing. So I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that in 5 years, WordPress is gone. But I think there's going to be a big shift in that percentage of market share. So hopefully that answers your question there. Anything else to follow up on that, Joe?
The CSS limitations. You had the concept of just turning on a site or choosing a theme.
Oh, the theme.
Imagine, the theme. Imagine if you, in Webflow, you could have proper class organization, class renaming, bulk class management, proper management of combo classes, and you could create a CSS file or a theme that can then be distributed to other builds. So maybe Finsweet can release 20 different builds that do different things, and you can just put whatever theme you want on it, which is colors, which is button style, and then you have your branded site ready to go.
Yeah.
Once that type of thing happens, once that type of thing happens, there's no catching Webflow.
Well, and you're seeing a lot of this happen with frameworks like Hatch and just like utility classes. I think Styleflow is another one that's real popular out there. We've got some internal tools that we use for like our team to build projects that kind of like works as a theming element to create some core systems. But what I think like we'll see even further down the road is like, and this is where I was going to before I kind of got sidetracked, is Webflow with clonable, not clonables, but symbols and nested symbols and kind of creating components, right? So imagine you could now link symbols overrides to the CMS. You could create templates, themes, style guides that are so robust and so like well built that you could literally see real complex builds coming where they never have to see like the navigator itself. They're just opening the symbol panel. They're just drag, drop this element, drag this element, you know, boom, boom, boom. And they got this Lego block kit that just helps them build. We're already seeing really powerful themes like that. Flowbase has a lot of tools like that, but I think, you know, you can expect that to grow significantly, and that'll be a lot of tools for lower level Webflow users. So let's go to the next one here. Kyle.
We have a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Comment from Sam Pilgrim. How do you recommend managing a large custom code base for a Webflow site? I'm so glad you asked, Sam. We are building something for that. In the past few months, we hired a whole bunch of developers, not even really Webflow knowledgeable people, just developers, people that create applications. One of those applications is JavaScript management tool. It is a JavaScript hosting file that works very well with Webflow. So yeah, we're building that type of thing. That sounds like exactly what you're looking for. And as we work with more enterprise clients, we need this. We don't need it on the small sites. We don't need it on the 5K or the 10K or the 15K smaller sites that we build. We do need it on the enterprise sites that need to integrate with everything, that need the big database, that need the APIs. So we are on that, absolutely. And then let's follow up with that comment from Pixel Geek.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nelson says, the first company to make a product that can pull a WordPress site into Webflow with one click wins the game. Just saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting comment.
Well, it's funny.
So if Webflow did release a JavaScript API, if there was a Designer API, JavaScript API for us to interact with Designer, we could go and start planning that tomorrow. That's something that we could actually figure out. But Webflow doesn't give us clear documentation on how to interact with Designer or how to do something like that. So yeah, that's, if Webflow releases this documentation, Nelson, I think that's going to happen very quickly.
Yeah. Rohan's keeping count for me over here. We were at 94 for 1 second. Y'all share this out. Let's break 100. Let's break some records today on the show. Johnny Gomez, what's up, Johnny? Appreciate you dropping by. He mentioned cross-project symbols and style guides. Yes. That's kind of what I was trying to say. He's saying it a lot more eloquently than I was when I was talking about my systems and whatnot. But yeah, style systems and components that you can share across projects without like duplicating the class structure and whatnot. That would be amazing. Let's see, Pierre, Pixel Geek. I feel that would only work if the structure was properly done in WordPress in the first place. Yeah, of course, mapping all of that could be a cluster, especially with like custom post types, and who knows how that's all mapped out. So let's see, Pablo, symbols.
You know, actually,
yeah. Go ahead.
I don't think it would be smart to try to analyze the code of a WordPress site and then turn that into a Webflow site, because WordPress is just all over the place with how the code is and what theme you use. And to make an all-in-one WordPress to Webflow is a lot.
Yeah.
I would much rather love to look at the site, look at the CSS file, try to analyze what that structure looks like, and then try to recreate that visually rather than going the code method.
Yeah.
Do I know how that would work? Not exactly, but that's, you don't want to fix an old Band-Aid. You want to put a new one on.
Yeah, I could see pulling the database in, pulling the content structure, like a pure migration. Medium did this really cool. When Medium was first starting out, you could like put a URL into Medium and it would pull that article. It would go scrape the page and then render that article on the page. So I think Webflow could do something like that, where like you can pull the database structure and it creates your collections and whatnot, but you would still have to kind of design everything. And I don't know how it would translate. I mean, I don't know, but that doesn't mean it can't be solved. The other thing I wonder is, could at some point Webflow accept code itself? Could you bring a raw HTML and CSS file, spit it into Webflow, and then start working with that in its visual tool set? That would be a very interesting thing. Again, very speculative. Don't want to get anyone excited about things that are not even being thought of over there. Johnny's asking a question for Finsweet. Do y'all use the regular Webflow, or have you injected Webflow with custom CSS functionality, add-ons, edits? I think, Johnny, I'm not sure if what you're talking about here is in like the editor. Do we have like extra elements inside of our Finsweet designer that gives us some of this functionality? Or because I know, like,
I think that's the question.
Some tools have started hacking the designer to add some functionality right in there. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, hold on. Now I do need some clarification on that. Is that inside designer, or is that the published site? I'll do a quick answer on both. Yeah. Published sites, what we see as regular Webflow is now including JavaScript, custom CSS, extra functionality. Because we're dealing with the enterprise clients, this is a requirement. So instead of turning them away, we find out how to do it. So most of our big sites are filled with JavaScript. Maybe not inside Webflow, but there is a lot of JavaScript happening in the background. Yeah. In terms of in Designer, do we have any tools that change the view of Designer? No, and I am not a fan of that. Yeah. Why? We do tutorials, we do walkthroughs, we are screen sharing with clients. To show them a different UI than what they are going to see natively, I think is a big disservice to the community and to our clients. So we have a pretty strict no changing things inside Designer policy. Yeah, for that reason.
That makes a lot of sense, and I hadn't even thought about that. So, Johnny, hopefully that answers your question there. Christian Lechner, hi, JavaScript management would be awesome. Always have to host my scripts on GitHub, and possible loading NPM package would make my life a lot easier. Yeah, I think we're working on a solution like that to have basically all your JavaScript files handled in one place. I'll let Joe say more about that if he wants to. I know he teased it a little bit ago, but let's see. Any other thoughts, Joe? Cliffhanger? Just awkward silence? Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to not give away too much information about it. This is still, we're still building it.
It's so early.
Yeah, we're first releasing a more simple version, and we already have spec'd out the version 2. After we release this, we have a version 2. We're going to continue building this platform. You'll be able to put in Finsweet code snippets. You'll be able to see our own repository. You'll be able to add your own libraries. There's so many different things that you'll be able to do long term with it. But yeah, we'll keep you updated on it.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
Okay, you see some laughing.
I don't mean to laugh in the middle here. But this guy goes, Mark Thurman, a WordPress site in Webflow would be like a Mona Lisa, but painted with cream cheese. And for some reason, that just got me laughing. I agree. And Pierre, that's following up with Pierre, talking about it'd be better to restructure the database and build it optimized for Webflow. I agree. And that may be why some of those like easy WordPress to Webflow migrations either don't exist or may take longer to come. It may be a lot more complex than you think because of the variability of a WordPress build. And so, yeah, I agree. You may want to, as the migration process happens, find better ways to structure some of the content and remap those databases. So let's see, what's one for cross-project symbols and interactions? Pierre, however, one tool for automatically mapping all 301s after the site structure has changed would be interesting for SEO. Yeah, I still think that there's some things like bulk 301. There's still some stuff for SEO and from a technical standpoint that I think people would like to see better. This is one of those things where, again, it's not a pure limitation. It's just kind of a manual, tedious process to do it. And there are some hacks, there are some workarounds I've seen for bulk 301 updates, but it's not super user-friendly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if anybody has some bulk 301 comments, updates, things that you want to do, send us an email, communications@finsweet.com. We have a solution for this. We're thinking of turning it into a Chrome extension. So if we can put on a couple more features here, make it a little bit more user-friendly, let us know.
Great. Let's see. I know some people have added an expand custom code window button, for example, or T-Rex changing the Webflow color to a purple color. Yeah, I think that's kind of what Joe was saying. We're not real interested in doing. But I agree. Some people are doing some interesting things with that. And I could see, I think it was Chris Spags one time teased adding an extra tab to the settings panel to add like, you know, some of his functionality inside of there. I could see the appeal for this. I could see that when Webflow builds a plugin interface where they offer some of that real estate to those plugins to like, here's where your panel goes, or here's where the added functionality goes. Again, complete speculation at this point, talking or thinking about any of that. So Kyle, are enterprise clients using the Webflow editor, or as I would assume, they would want to understand the designer so they have full control? How do you handle handoff training for that?
Great question.
Yeah, the Webflow editor for sure. We try to keep people out of the designer if we can. Just because it's a
only
nightmare.
if they specifically require it. If they're like, hey, we need designer access, we need designer training, we'll do it. But yeah, we start off with the editor and we stop there.
Yeah.
You do not want people in the designer that do not know the designer.
What's our process for that? Do we have, talk a little bit about that. Do we have
video
documentation that we
tutorials?
offer? Okay, video tutorials.
Yeah, we do not give general information. We say if you want general information, go to Webflow University. They have everything that you need to know about the editor and designer in there in a simple version. We film a video showing the client their site. It could be a few different videos, it could be a long video, but you're going to say, hey, this is how this works. Be mindful of doing this in the CMS. When you do this, this will happen. And that could be a walkthrough in editor, that could be a walkthrough in designer. This is a really nice service touch. People really appreciate it. And this is something that goes right into the pitch for us and is a big selling point. Hey, we're going to do all of this, and by default, we are going to onboard you to your site, educate you on how to use it, so you don't even have to contact us afterwards unless there's something big. People love that.
95 concurrent viewers. Can we find 5 more?
Ooh.
Come on, YouTube algorithm.
Come
on, Twitter share. Come on, like something. Let's do it. Thanks for keeping an eye on that, Pierre and Rohan. Penny, if you're still with us, thanks for hanging out with us. See you next time. Let's see. Hey guys, great content. Just wanted to tell you that I really appreciate everything you do. As a designer with basically no knowledge of code who's new to Webflow, I can say you guys are dope. Peter, we appreciate that comment. 99 people,
99,
so whoever shared or
99.
wherever that's coming from. Peter, we love doing this. This has been so exciting to kind of watch this grow, and for the stream itself, for Finsweet, just the community in general, we really get fulfilled by creating these things and giving them back to the community. I think both Joe and I have that servant heart in the context that we want to pass these opportunities that we have down to other people, and we're always looking for ways to help bring people up. That's what this show is all about, is kind of helping people grow and build their business in Webflow. And so, yeah, we appreciate you saying that. Let's go, 99. We're literally not leaving till we get 100. And nobody here can leave. Because
there we go.
Hey, we hit 100. All right.
I see it, 100. Wow. Thank you, everybody. That's awesome.
Now we got to like figure out, now we got to break that. So now we've set a benchmark. Thanks to everyone for helping us set a benchmark that we will have to try to hit next week again. So anyway, Johnny with another comment, and I think this will be our last question unless some crazy stuff comes in here, but let's see. Not sure if this was answered before or not, but how do you deal with limitations? How do you deal with what's missing in Webflow? Do you just say, no, that can't be done, or do you just go for it? Yeah, Johnny, we talked about that a little bit kind of at the beginning, and there's different tiers of limitations, right? So I think that depending on what your skill set is in Webflow, depending on the types of projects, you're going to start banging your head into these limitations at different points. And so if you're a first-time user, the limitation may be understanding how Webflow works. If you're a little bit more, you know, maybe filtering or CMS sliders or CMS tabs may be a limitation for you. And then once you start getting to that next tier of enterprise level or agency work, then there's different limitations there. And so what we talked about through the beginning of this was really just figuring out, learning as much as you can and figuring out how to sell inside of those limitations, right? You kind of want to make sure that the ceiling of your limitations is higher than the projects that you're selling. And that's kind of a variable situation for everyone who's out there. And so there's no, you know, like cut and dry, hey, here's a limitation, you know, like who knows, right? You may come up with a whole product or the next groundbreaking plugin beating your head against this limitation and solving a problem for the community, which is, again, what's led to a lot of Finsweet growth and a lot of our growth over the time. And so hopefully that answers your question there. Let's see.
And Johnny, if you think something can't be done in Webflow, you're not thinking hard enough. Everything's possible. Make friends with a JavaScript developer, make friends with someone technical. Anything can be done in Webflow. It's just a fact. We're doing it right now. So it's always possible. You just have to find the way.
Awesome. Let's see. With all the talk about member accounts, et cetera, for the next big update, do you feel it would be as robust as MemberStack? Michael, and this will be, let's see, the second to last question here. I don't think it will be as robust. I think user accounts will be very basic at first. I think you'll see, just like e-commerce, they'll start with kind of like a core set of functions, and then they'll grow out from there. I think people will still continue to use MemberStack, and it will, again, just depend on your specific use case. So anyway, let's see. Thoughts, I believe hosting is killer. Projects. Okay, Clint, I believe hosting is the killer. Projects gives you the features of, say, Elementor, Advanced Custom Fields Pro, plus other premium plugins, but I can host many sites in my hosting and etc. Thus, folks go to WordPress. I agree, Clint. That is a concern. You know, you've got expensive hosting, but there's expensive WordPress hosting too. And the more performant you get in your WordPress hosting, the more expensive that becomes. I agree. If you have some flexibility, that may cause people to want to work to WordPress. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, that's a whole show probably. Hosting and actually we have that on the list. Again, go to the Finsweet homepage. You can vote. I think we have a topic on there about switching from WordPress to Webflow as an agency. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go vote on that. Austin, we won't get into specifics about how to create a map and the filtering. That's a little too complex.
I'll give a quick one on that.
Sure.
I'd like to give a quick one on that. So Austin, I want you to think of Webflow CMS like this and displaying these lists on the page. If you can render that data on the page, you can use JavaScript to do anything with that data. So just because Webflow gives us the collection list wrapper, collection list, collection item, and ideally it fits in a grid, we don't have to use it that way. We can have that collection list hidden. We can use JavaScript, the data is there, and then we can go and render that information on the page. So this is not easy. I'm not saying this is one click implement into map, but with JavaScript, you can have a solution where you read all that data in Webflow CMS, displayed in a list, pinned on a map. Absolutely possible. This is a concept that we use all throughout CMS library. Put the data on the page, hide it, and we're going to go and find it with JavaScript and then do other things with it. Maybe put it somewhere else on the page, maybe do something crazy with it. But that's what you can do. Get it on the page and you can make it happen with JavaScript.
Yeah. And I think that's a good place to leave it because otherwise we might start teasing other things we're building. But yeah, there's a lot you can do, again, understanding the technical limitations to their fullest and then bringing people in that can do other things with code. This is where you lose the whole no code spectrum. And this is where you go into more low code, heavy code stuff for this. And so thanks everyone who was hanging with us today. You guys are amazing. We hit our 100 threshold for the first time today. So that's a big benchmark. We'll go figure out how to commemorate that sometime. I don't know. Let us know what you guys like to see next. Make sure to vote on the F and Growth website. You can submit a topic. You can vote for specific things you'd like to see us talk about in an upcoming show. If your vote hits that top vote getting mark, I think it's like Monday at midnight or something like that, we'll cut it off because we need a little bit of time to kind of prep. And so we're prepping for some of the episodes as they go, knowing that it's going to take us more than 6 hours to prep for a show. But it's all up to you guys. What you want to see next, we'll focus our attention on that topic. So go to the website and let us know about that. Joe, any closing thoughts, words here before we cut out? Yeah, it's been a pleasure. If we don't get over 100 next week, we're canceling the show. That's so right, you better show up. That's right. Thanks, everyone. Great. Yeah, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. Let's F and grow.